right. Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest, pinch hitter, coming in at the last minute, and yet fantastic, skilled. Our next guest is the author of the novel Every Anxious Wave. Woo! Yeah. Check it out. It's a good one. Check it out. And here to do some reading of a declamation type of reading, please welcome to the stage Ms. Mo Daviau.
Thank you to Mr. Dio and Mr. Moran for inviting me to read this very important message, which is Popper's account of scientific theories. Selections from Karl Popper's Conjectures and Refutations from 1962. After the collapse of the Austrian Empire, there had been a revolution in Austria. The air was full of revolutionary slogans and ideas, and new and often wild theories. Among the theories which interested me, Einstein's theory of relativity was no doubt by far the most important. Three others were Marx's theory of history, Freud's psychoanalysis, and Alfred Adler's so-called individual psychology, scare quotes. There was a lot of popular nonsense talked about these theories, and especially about relativity, as it still happens even today. But I was fortunate in those who introduced me to the study of this theory. We all, the small circle of students to which I belonged, were thrilled with the result of Eddington's eclipse observations, which in 1919 brought the first important confirmation of Einstein's theory of gravitation. It was a great experience for us, and one which had a lasting influence on my intellectual development. The three other theories I have mentioned were also widely discussed among students at that time. I myself happened to come into personal contact with Alfred Adler, and even to cooperate with him in his social work among the children and young people and the working class districts of Vienna, where he had established social guidance clinics. It was during the summer of 1919 that I began to feel more and more dissatisfied with these three theories: the Marxist theory of history, psychoanalysis, and individual psychology, and I began to feel dubious about their claims to scientific status. My problem perhaps first took the simple form: what is wrong with Marxism, psychoanalysis, and individual psychology? Why are they so different from physical theories, from Newton's theory, and especially from the theory of relativity? To make this contrast clear, I should explain that few of us at the time would have said that we believed in the truth of Einstein's theory of gravitation. This shows that it was not my doubting the truth of those other three theories which bothered me, but something else. Yet neither was it that I merely felt mathematical physics to be more exact than the sociological or psychological type theory. Thus, what worried me was neither the problem of truth at that stage, at least, nor the problem of exactness or measurability. It was rather that I felt that these other three theories, though posing as sciences, had in fact more in common with primitive myths than with science, that they resembled astrology rather than astronomy. I found that those of my friends who were admirers of Marx, Freud, and Adler were impressed by a number of points common to these theories, and especially by their apparent explanatory power. These theories appeared to be able to explain practically everything that happened within the fields to which they referred. The study of any of them, it seemed, to have the effect of an intellectual conversion or revelation, opening your eyes to a new truth hidden from those not yet initiated. Once your eyes were thus opened, you saw confirming instances everywhere. The world was full of verifications of the theory. Whatever happened always confirmed it. Thus, its truth appeared manifest, and unbelievers were clearly people who did not want to see the manifest truth, who refused to see it either because it was against their class interest or because of their repressions, which were still unanalyzed and crying aloud for treatment. The most characteristic element in the situation seemed to be the incessant stream of confirmations, of observations which verified the theories in question, and this point was constantly emphasized by their adherents. A Marxist could not open a newspaper without finding on every page confirming evidence for his interpretation of history, not only in the news, but also in its presentation, which revealed the class bias of the paper, and especially, of course, in what the paper did not say. The Freudian analysts emphasized that their theories were constantly verified by their, quote, clinical observations. As for Adler, I was much impressed by a personal experience. Once, in 1919, great year, I reported to him a difficulty in analyzing in terms of his theory of inferiority feelings, although he had not even seen the child. Slightly shocked, I asked him how he could be so sure. Because of my 1,000-fold experience, he replied. Whereupon I could not help saying, and with this new case, I suppose, your experience has become 1,001-fold. What I had in mind was that his previous observation may not have been much sounder than this new one, that each in its turn had been interpreted into light of previous experience, and at the time counted as additional confirmation. What, I asked myself, did it confirm? No more than a case could be interpreted in the light of the theory, but this meant very little, I reflected, since every conceivable case could be interpreted in the light of Adler's theory, or equally of Freud's. I may illustrate this by two very different examples of human behavior, that of a man who pushes a child into the water with the intention of drowning it, and of a man who sacrifices his life in an attempt to save the child. Each of these two cases can be explained with equal ease in Freudian and in Adlerian terms. According to Freud, the first man suffered from repression, say, of some component of his Oedipus complex, while the second man had achieved sublimation. According to Adler, the first man suffered from feelings of inferiority, producing perhaps the need to prove to himself that he dared commit some crime, and so did the second man, whose need was to prove himself that he dared to rescue the child. I could not think of any human behavior which could not be interpreted in terms of either theory. It was precisely this fact, that they always fitted, that they were always confirmed, which in the eyes of their admirers constituted strongest argument in favor of these theories. It began to dawn on me that this apparent strength was in fact their weakness. With Einstein's theory, the situation was strikingly different. Take one typical instance, Einstein's prediction, just then confirmed by the finding of Eddington's expedition. Einstein's gravitational theory had led to the result that the light must be attracted by heavy bodies, such as the sun, precisely as material bodies were attracted. As a consequence, it could be calculated that light from a distant fixed star, whose apparent position was close to the sun, would reach the earth from such a direction that the star would seem to be slightly shifted away from the sun. Or, in other words, that stars close to the sun would look as if they had moved a little away from the sun and from one another. This is a thing which cannot normally be observed, since such stars are rendered invisible in daytime by the sun's overwhelming brightness. But during an eclipse, it is possible to take photographs of them. If the same constellation is photographed at night, one can measure distances of the two photographs and check the predicted effect. Now, the impressive thing about this case is the risk involved in a prediction of this kind. If observation shows that the predicted effect is definitely absent, then the theory is simply refuted. The theory is incompatible with certain possible results of observation. In fact, with results which everybody before Einstein would have expected. This is quite different from the situation I have previously described, when it turned out that the theories in question were compatible with the most divergent human behavior, so that it was practically impossible to describe any human behavior that might not have been claimed to be a verification of these theories. These considerations led me in the winter of 1919 to 1920 to conclusions which I may now reformulate as follows. 1. It is easy to obtain confirmations or verifications for nearly every theory if we look for confirmations. 2. Confirmations should count only if they are are the result of risky predictions. That is to say, if unenlightened by the theory in question, we should have expected an event which was incompatible with the theory, an event which would have refuted the theory. 3, every good scientific theory is a prohibition. It forbids certain things to happen. The more a theory forbids, the better it is. 4, a theory which is not refutable by any conceivable event is non-scientific. Irrefutability is not a virtue of theory, as people often think, but a vice. 5, every genuine test of a theory is an attempt to falsify it or to refute it. Testability is falsifiability, but there are degrees of testability. Some theories are more testable, more exposed to refutation than others. They take, as it were, greater risks. 6, confirming evidence should not count except when it is the result of a genuine test of the theory. This means that it can be presented as a serious but unsuccessful attempt to falsify the theory. 7, some genuinely testable theories, when found to be false, are still upheld by admirers, for example, by introducing ad hoc some auxiliary assumption, or by reinterpreting the theory ad hoc in such a way that it escapes refutation. Such a procedure is always possible, but it rescues the theory from refutation only at the price of destroying or at least lowering its scientific status. I later, after 1920 NS, described such a rescuing operation as a conventionalist twist or conventionalist stratagem. One can sum up all of this by saying that the criterion of a scientific status of a theory is its falsifiability or refutability or testability. Thank you. It's been 100 years since I think I wrote that, so sure, I'll take questions.
I'm a little fuzzy on some of the, so any question, of course.
How do you think Karl Popper would feel about the politicization of science?
Oh dear. I think the question was, how would Karl Popper feel about the politicization of science? I think he would be offended. I think that, as evidenced by what I just read, that would harm the intended outcome of testability and verifiability, et cetera, et cetera.
So, has anybody ever suggested that all of Freudian psychology was just a big psychoanalysis of Freud?
The question was, has anyone suggested that Freudian psychoanalysis is, wait, what? It's just a big psychoanalysis of Freud. I personally have it out for Freud because he is sort of the guy responsible for the opposite of the effect of the Me Too movement, which is the we don't believe you movement. And that when female patients came to him with news of incest or sexual assault, he just told them that they wanted it to save his reputation, basically. So with that, I've not given much thought to Freud's psychological well-being over the years. Maybe I should take 5 minutes of my day tomorrow during my lunch break and do that.
Is that good enough? That's pretty great.
Wow, a ringer. Wonderful.
Right there in the audience, a ringer, ladies and gentlemen. Pretty beautiful thing. Holy cow, that was great. She took questions. It's pretty great. With no mention of us just pulling her out of the audience to read this thing.
Yep.
Speaking of things happening, ladies and gentlemen, last call is a thing that might happen during our next segment. And if you forget to order that third milkshake before the axe drops, there isn't a scientist in the world strong enough to arm wrestle to win you another chance. That really happens. Don't take my word for it, though, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, take my word for it. Anyway, order extra drinks. What else? Tip your waitstaff handsomely. It's the only scientifically proven way to live a happy and rewarding life. It's been proven. Just like the T-zone. How about that? You get this oily skin, but then you get dry skin, and they sort of come together, that T-zone. It's between medicine and science, like technology and the medical profession. You get that Venn diagram, and right there in the middle, the T-zone.
He's right, you know.
That's right. 1 million scientists can't be wrong. All right, here we go.
You listen to nothing. It's just what you just read.
For God's sake.